Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back as we kick off today's festivities and exciting activities. So many wonderful things are happening today. It's still the 2025 annual PIBC conference. If you're wondering where you were today, we are exactly still here. The next chapter, and that's what we'll be talking about today in this morning's keynote presentation. First, I will acknowledge that we are on the unceded lands of territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, the nations who have existed in this place since the very beginnings of time. And this morning, it's a very special day at the conference for all of us. Just on a personal, professional, human level, just so honored that you're here. I spent some time this morning reading some of your work and looking up. You are truly beloved by so many people, and your contributions to post-secondary world, to academic world, and to knowledge is just so far surpassed. I feel like this is one of those days that I'll just say my day timer on a special day. I make a star. This is a triple star day. This is I'm very to be here in your presence. I feel this very deeply. So thank you. That was not in the script. I'm going to say, I'm sorry, Dave Crossley, for that. But truly honored that you are here on the stage today to speak to Indigenous cultures and languages and the work that you have done, both in your time as a Professor Emerita at the University of Victoria and then in the work that you continue to do to contribute to knowledge and learning. Wánosts'a7 was a recipient of the Order of Canada in 2020 and continues to do research and share knowledge on revolutionary curricula in Indigenous languages and language revitalization. So Dr. Lorna is from Líl'watul, which is for people looking for a Western geographic reference near Mount Currie, British Columbia. So the floor is yours, just looking so forward to this next piece of time and learning about your journey and the advice you have for us on the next chapter. Thank you.
Gukshum kika tohtla shlaqa الجونة كأن مخمن تولا شنو لاب shlaqa الجونة تتميكش كي Musqueam, ki Squamish, and we say Hopmish in my language, and the Tsleil-Waututh. And my name is Lorna Williams, and I thank the introduction, and I want to thank each of you for coming to be together, to learn together, to spend time together, to be community together. And it makes a big difference. My name is Lorna Williams. That's my English name. And I always share that my name Lorna came from the Scottish nurse who helped bring me into the world in my community of Mount Currie. My mom at that time was the healer in our community, and she's the one that you would have usually attended a birth, but because she was having me, her friend, a Scottish woman, had married into our valley and who lived not too far away from our community. And she and my mom became really good friends. And I visited Scotland last year with my grandson and my daughter. And I realized then why she was able to be such a good friend with my mom, in the 40s, because that was very unusual that she would become part of the community. And so when I visited the Highlands in Scotland, I realized that there was lots of connection that could have been made. And so I really appreciated that. My name Williams is And this happened to pretty much all of our people. My grandfather, his name was Líl'watul, and you know, land ownership is very new to us, because in our traditional ways we couldn't own the land. The land owned us. And because we were so dependent as humans on the land. And so we couldn't, you know, like we couldn't even imagine thinking that we could own it. And, but we used the land, we lived the land, we cared for the land, and had a relationship with the land all over our valleys. Like we didn't just stay in one place. We didn't ever just stay in one place, because humans are very, very hard on land, and land needs to be able to heal itself to, you know, from us. And so we traveled long distances. Like I grew up spending time in Whistler Mountain, what is now Whistler Mountain. Belp is what we called it. And when I drive by a certain place there's a spot where our stove still is. But there's a tree growing out to the chimney now, but it's still there, and I say hello every time I go by. And we traveled all up the valley, all the way to Toba Inlet and Jarvis Inlet on the coast, and so we had a good relationship with the seashell, the people in all along those waters. And anyway, when the settlers came, our people helped the settlers. You know, like first it was before the settlers came, the people came into the valley in search of things, and I remember one group that came, and we still have songs and dances that tell us that story, when the Spanish came through our valley, and then the gold rush came through our valley, and then the settlers came, and then to stay in the valley, because it wasn't an easy place that long time ago. But anyways, one of the settlers that came took our land. And his name was William. That was his first name. And so that name was given after they took my grandfather's land. They gave him that name, so he became William. And then when his children were born, they became Williams, and so that's how I got my last name. And I remember sitting on the train going home, and I happened to sit with his granddaughter. And so I told her that story. And I remember the look on her face. And, it's something that when people talk right now about, there's lots of talk about reconciliation. And part of reconciliation has to be knowing the history, even though can be really tough. And to not be ashamed of it, but to know it and to know the context within which we live. Your time together is looking into the future, the next chapter. But in order to be able to go into the next chapter, in order to be able to look ahead, you need to know where you've come from in a very honest way. in this country. And yesterday, I went on the tour to UBC, to the village that Musqueam has become a partner in developing. And I listened to the people who were part of the project, and I could hear that they took time to learn, and that they took time to establish a relationship. And, and that's, and in our history, that's new. That's a very new development. And so your next chapter really is to continue that. And I know that you're from all parts of this province and even from Washington. And so learning is very important. And so what I'm going to share with you this morning is just some of the complications that exist in our redevelopment. And the focus is on what we know, knowledge, learning, culture, and languages. And the first line on my title is szwatenem. Szwatenem. What it's all it means is what we know. That's kind of the translation. And you probably see the 7 there. Yeah, did you notice the 7? And were you wondering why there would be a 7 in the middle of in the middle? The 7 denotes a glottal stop. In the International Phonetics symbol, a glottal stop, the symbol is an unfinished question mark. And so when we were developing the writing system for our language in the 70s, we were working on typewriters. And we could have sawed off half the question mark, but I remember we were puzzling what to do. And all of a sudden, somebody said, "Oh, we could just use that number." And so we chose the 7. We thought it was a brilliant solution to our problem. But it's been very problematic. Because in our names, there's often a glottal stop at the end. And so, like in my name, Wánosts'a, it ends with a 7. I cannot register that name in British Columbia because of that, partly because of that 7. But that's usually what they always told me was the reason why I couldn't register my name. And but that's what it means, and we still think it's pretty good. So I said, thank you for coming to spend time together and to be here. Thank you so much for coming, for listening to me. Kalantwi is to listen. And Shnuknukwa, this is a very special word in Shnuknukwa. It means, it has multiple meanings, like some of our words. And Shnuknukwa can mean friends, and it means family, it means community, it means people gathering together to share an experience like what you're doing at your conference. And so you're all in Shnuknukwa, you're all part of a community. And then there are leaders. And there are ancestors. And there are both men and women. And the two-spirited people. And there are many people here who are experts in your fields, and you bring that knowledge, that experience, and that's important to be shared. And I just want to say that how happy I am and to introduce myself, and I'd just like you to do the same, to just kind of close your eyes and tell the land that's way underneath there where you've come from, where your people are come from. Because the spirits of the land, the ancestors, are here with us, and they like to know who you are. And so thank you for introducing yourselves. And this is a little bit of a complicated map. And I wanted to start with this because in order to be able to do your work, there are two really deep and broad areas that you really need to learn. And one of them is to learn who the people are that you're really a part of, that you probably weren't even aware you were a part of. As you work, as you do your work, as you move and live on the lands where you are. And there are Indigenous people there. There are First Nations people, Métis people. And what we've always said, what our belief is that our languages are born on the land. And so that our languages, our Indigenous languages, are voices of the land. And so that's why when we go somewhere, we use our language to introduce ourselves to the spirits of the land wherever we are, because we say we come in a good way. We're here to do good things, and this is who we are. And this map was developed by an organization called First Peoples Cultural Council, FPCC. So if you go to their website, you'll see this map. This map took 10 years to develop. And it took 10 years because we wanted the people to create the boundaries and the names. And there's been so much disruption in our knowledge systems, our relationships, that sometimes we're mixed up. And so it took us this long to bring people together every year and for them to be able to place themselves on the map. And also to be able to agree to what they would call their language. Because what has happened to us is that everybody else has named us but us. And that's tough. Missionaries named us. The people who came to explore named us. Anthropologists named us. Linguists named us. politicians named us. So everybody but us. And just to give you an example, in my introduction, I said I was Líl'watul. I come from Mount Currie. But there's another place called Líl'watul, which is from our name, from that name, word Líl'wat. How did it get that name in Líl'wat? During the gold rush that came through our valleys, the people had to go over land to go to another lake. And so one of them bought a horse from somebody in our valley, and he named his horse Líl'wat. And so he rode his horse overland, took it on a boat, and it got to what is now Líl'wat. And if any of you have ever driven the Duffy Lake Road, you'll have passed through a slide. And where that slide is was already then part of the road, the trail. He was leading his horse along, and his horse slipped and slid down the slide. And so that spot became known as the place where Líl'wat died. Then when the map makers came along and they were naming things, they named Líl'wat. And for our people, that's been extremely frustrating, because the people up there are szwatenem. We're Líl'wat, but our name is up there, and they have to say they're from Líl'wat, which they're not. So it's become, so I'm telling you the story just so as you know about the challenges that we face because just from naming, and how complicated and complex it can be. And so doing this map was really important. And I'm trying to get the Commissioner of Indigenous Languages to do a similar map for all across Canada. In Canada, there are 11, some people say 12, language families. So a language family is a set of languages and that share construction and sound. And 7 of those language families are in British Columbia. And so right away you can see that the diversity of languages that exist in this province. And and we wanted to be able to share that. We wanted to be able to share the languages that share common features. And we also then want to share that language is a large part of our identity. And so our languages are really important. So we say that every time the land changes, language changes. Every time the land changes, language changes. So we have language families, and we have languages. There are 36 languages. Then of those languages, there are many dialects. And the First Peoples Cultural Council, I want you to get to know this organization. So I want you to go to their website, because the First Peoples Cultural Council is a Crown agency. So it's a government it's a provincial government creation. And it's created all kinds of turmoil. Because the first thing that you need to be aware of is that First Nations are largely a federal relationship. And so to participate and to be a part of something created by a province can be very problematic because it affects our sense of rights. It questions really whether we can have a relationship with a provincial government and provincial institutions. And you're all part of that system. And so that's something that you have to really pay attention to when you're working with Indigenous people of these lands. And to understand what the tensions might be, okay? That's important. And it's not something that you should take personally, but you need to know that it affects you, but it's greater than you alone, and so it's something that you have to sort through. And so, First Peoples, when it first began, this was almost 30 years ago now. Was new, and it was very problematic, but people worked it through, and it now has it's governed by a board from Indigenous people who know about language, culture, arts, and heritage, and they have an advisory of every language in the province, and so its functioning, I think, is really important for you to know about, that it's possible, and to know what people needed to do and how they went about their work. So it's really also important for you to know that because of our history, that about 95% of the people who live in our communities don't know their didn't learn their language from babyhood, and they don't know it off the land, and that's what has happened to us. And so the work that First Peoples is doing, revitalizing languages, is enormous. And they're doing things that are innovative, they're creative, and what our people have always done, and that is to figure out what we need to do. And so they provide, for example, mentorship programs. They connect fluent speakers with new speakers, younger people of all ages, to learn the language. They create language nests, language programs for infants, for toddlers, to reconnect them with their grandparents and older people, aunts and uncles. And it's a program that was developed with the Maori in New Zealand, and we brought it over here. It's so we go all over the world to figure out what people are doing. We learn from them. We bring it here because our educational systems have never really supported us until very recently. We learned lots, for example, in the 70s from the Welsh. Because in the 70s, the Welsh were doing what we're doing. And I'm already running out of time, and this is just the third slide. I better... but I want you to understand that this next part that I'm going to rush through is part of the history that you and we have to work to overcome, okay? That's the chapter we're in. And so knowing who we are, szwatenem, is really important, because that's been extremely confusing to... So I'm Líl'watul, as I said. I'm Líl'watul, which the ul, it means that the place where I was born and I lived is really the center of Líl'watul. So the ul, that's what it means. It means the land that's at the center. And so I was very, very, very fortunate to be raised and was born there. Líl'watul. And so that's the version of my name, of my land name. I'm also szwatenem because my mom was from up in that area. But there's two spellings of szwatenem, because the other thing that's happened to us is that linguists from Canada, linguists from the United States, linguists from different parts of the world have worked on our language. And they've all created a writing system that they like. And so in some of our communities, there can be up to 6 writing systems for a language. And so it can get really confusing in a community. And so when you're working with a community and you're wondering why you're seeing multiple renditions of a word, a name, that's why. And oftentimes what would happen is that these outsiders would come, these experts would come, and they'd work with a family. And they'd work with a family, and they would, oftentimes they were graduate students. They would do their work, they would do their study. Off they would go back to wherever they came from, and take the whatever they worked with them. And they worked usually with a family. And one of the things that's a descriptor of who we are is we're very loyal people. When we work with people, we stay loyal to that work. And so the development then, of a writing system with a family, that family will stay loyal to that work. And so it makes it really, really hard to sort out in a community, and that has then now multiple writing systems for their language. And so that's you'll find that in the work that you do. So we're called Native, and that for a long time that's who we were, natives. And natives with a capital N and native with a small n. And oftentimes when that word is used, it's derogatory, it's belittling. And then Indian became our official name from the federal government. And some people say that word Indian came because Columbus was trying to reach India, and he ended up in the Americas. And so we became Indian, because he thought that's where he landed. But there are also other stories that show that that word was derived from an even earlier time. And so we don't know where it comes from, but that's what we're called. We continue to be called that. That still continues to be our official name. And then Amerindian. I remember I did a project. This is a long time ago, and I started collecting all the names we were called, and I came up and I saw this one, and I was thinking, oh, that's a different one. And there were 37 labels that named us, and so we can get confused about who we are. When Canada repatriated its constitution in the 80s, the word Aboriginal came to be in Canada. And so in those discussions, we became Aboriginal. And so that's still a word that comes up, and it's still a federal word and a word that's used. And then people have started using the word Indigenous to mean the multiple First Nations, Métis and Inuit, in collective. So it's a collective term, and it's used in many parts of the world. But there are people who say we're not Indigenous because Indigenous is used to describe people who've been colonized. And so, for example, the Samoans say we've never been colonized. And so because we're Samoans, we're not Indigenous. And so, so that word can be complicated, but that's a word that we're using today, and people are familiar with it. Then we have First Nations, First Peoples, Métis, and Inuit. And it's really important for you to know that we all now live collectively. And sometimes what can happen is that in our land, for example, because we do land acknowledgements, we talk about the lands on where we're gathering, where we live. And in Vancouver, for example, where we're meeting today, the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh are acknowledged, and that's good. But I want you to know that all across this country, there are places that are gathering spots for lots and lots of Indigenous people. And it's important in every town you're in. Yes, there are the peoples of the land, but there are people who also come there, Indigenous people from other lands. And because of what's happened to us politically, we tend to disregard that group of people. So in Vancouver, for example, I used to work here many, many years ago. And there I found that there were schools, for example, where the largest speaker group in the school was Cree. Yeah, in Vancouver. And then there were schools, for example, where the largest speaker group were Heiltsuk, from Bella Bella, Heiltsuk. Why? Because the Heiltsuk were fisher people, and they traveled the coast, and so they established communities a community here in Vancouver. And many of their children went to the same school. And so it's really important for you when in the towns that you're in to understand that. And because it's happened because of displacement. And I just wanted to do these other words over here, status and non-status. Status Indians, there was a story in the paper yesterday. I don't know if you read the paper, but it talked about how the Department of, well, what used to be the Department of Indian Affairs, now it's Indigenous Services, I think, how far behind they are in issuing status cards. So if you come from a reserve community and you were born, your family was born there, you can hold a status card from there. You're registered from that community. This is important because lots of people have lost their status. Lots. One of the earliest groups that lost their status were the people who fought in the Canada's wars. The First World War, the Second World War. If you fought in those wars, you lost your status. So many of those men couldn't come home. And if a man lost his status, then so did his family. And so they had to leave the communities. They had to leave the communities. And because these new laws that governed us were based on patriarchy, if a family broke apart, it's the man who could stay behind, and the woman had to leave communities. And she lost her status. Her children lost their status. So they ended up in urban centers. So oftentimes in Vancouver, for example, I would see households that were made up of grandmothers and mothers and children. And so there was a long time that if we were coming from our community and going into an urban center, so if my dad would come to sell his furs, he had to get permission. He had to get a card, a letter from the Indian agent to say that he was going to be away from the community, and he could only be away from the community for 2 weeks. And so if we all came with him, then we had to be we had to be listed there. And so in order to leave a reserve for any space of time, we had to have permission. If we overstayed our permission, we could lose our status. So that's another way of losing status. And I want you to know that when we used to come to Vancouver for my father to sell his furs, we couldn't travel in Vancouver anywhere. We could only go to what is now Skid Row or to Chinatown. And so we couldn't move. So we had a permission to leave, but we were restricted as to where we could travel in the cities. And when I began working here in the 80s, it was unusual for me, Indian, status, Líl'watul, to spend time on the west side of Vancouver. My office was at Granville and near Granville and Broadway. There were restaurants there that wouldn't serve me because I'm brown. Okay, that kind of, people who live today, Indigenous people, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, have that experience. If people could pass, like if they had white ancestry and they were fair and they could pass for Italian, that's what they did. And that would be the only way that they could live or travel in many parts of what is now this city. You don't realize that you're working with people who've had that kind of experience, but you are. And you have to be aware of it. That still sits on our shoulders. So on reserve and off reserve. So there are many, many ways in which our people have become identified as off reserve. And one of those, down here you see the Skip 60s scoop, which you've probably all heard of because it's been in the news. People talk about it. The 60s scoop, it happened before the 60s, it happened since. But there are children who were removed from their families as babies and sent out for fostering and for adoption. Those children are trying to come back home from all over the world. They find out that they have a connection to a community. And can you imagine what it must be like to find that out and then to try to make a connection? But there are thousands and thousands of those people who are, many of them now, grandparents, trying to find their way back home. And in today's world, where there is such a focus on identity, where you belong and who doesn't belong, it can be tough. Bill C-35, one of the things that happened in the fight for our placement and our relationship to the Constitution of Canada, one of the issues that came to be focused on were the women who lost their status because they're women. And so Canada, to make itself feel good, said we'll let you have your status back. So what's happened, so those became known as the C-35s. But what happened with the C-35s is they adopted what the Americans do. And that is, they focused it too on blood quantum. So that's a new idea on our identity. And what they did was they said, grandmother, you can have your status back. If your children's father was First Nations, they can have status. If any of those children married non-Indigenous men, not the women, the men, then those children could only have half status. Then the next generation could only have quarter. You didn't, like people tend in Canada not to talk about that. And so eventually, you could lose status again in your family. And that's, but, you know, and so it's insidious what we can do. And so in your planning, I want you to realize that the complications, sorry, it's I told you that I'm working with a commissioner about creating that new map. That's what that is. I want you to know, what time is it? Oh, I've got 10 more minutes. This word is a word that I found when I moved to Vancouver Island, to Victoria, and I began working with the szwatenem speaking people in in the people that are close to the airport and the ferry, if you know Victoria, that end of that peninsula, the szwatenem speaking people. It's beautiful. And Mount Currie was the second band-controlled school in Canada. And the school in Brentwood Bay, on the Tsartlip Reserve, they were the third. And so it's very special. And what these communities have done to save their language is just so phenomenal. I'm just, they're amazing. But I asked one of the elders, when I became director of Indigenous education at the University of Victoria, I was trying to create Indigenous education. So I said, you know, we always learned, and we were taught by our elders, by our parents, by our aunties and uncles. I said, that's how we learned and passed things down. And I'm sharing this with you because I asked, you know, like what the word would be in szwatenem. And this is the word that they told me, eltelnicht. And what it means, like it has all these multiple understandings. So they said it means to learn to be a whole human being. To learn to be a whole human being. That's what learning and teaching are all about. And this is important when you think about what we've done to the educational system, is to not be a whole human being. We valued certain parts of human existence. And so it's important for us to recreate this idea of teaching and learning to be a whole human being. So holistic knowledge, that all knowledge is inseparable from the land and from the place and from the spirits of those lands. The language, the kinships, the laws. And it's really important that we focus on balance and harmony and respect, that those are key. So in all Indigenous peoples that I'm aware of around the world, and I've traveled the world and met with and worked with Indigenous people all over, this is very common, these ideas of relationship, and of being able to live and to learn balance. And and that we're all connected, our spirit, our bodies, our emotions, and our cognition. And that the ancestors and the descendants that are people coming behind us, we need to be aware of at all times. And I worked for many years with a Navajo, with a Diné, a man, and we did lots of work together here in Vancouver. And so their word is ke, ke. And it means understanding interdependent, compassionate relationships as they manifest in life. That's teaching and learning amongst those people. That's their understanding. That the earth and sky are in relationship. That the self, the family, the community, and the nation are in relationship. And that all need to be thought of and that we need to be aware of. That we have a relationship with all the animals that are on our lands and all the plants. And it's they who teach us. It's not we who teach them. And, so that really is a very special relationship. And again, for them, the ancestors and the descendants, those who come behind us, are extremely important for us to remember and to take into consideration in everything we do. I talked in between all of those things about the assaults and the insults on our bodies, our spirits, our minds, our families, and our nations. It was disease, smallpox, influenza. The common cold was devastating to our people and continues to be. And forced disconnections from our lands. So the place where I grew up, which is now called Mount Currie, that was only part of where we lived. But in the 1800s, we were forced to build houses and a community there. And we couldn't go back to all the other parts of our lands. And so community, like living in that kind of community, was new to us, to be stable and to be stationary. So we were movers in the past, and people continue to have that sense. And so we were forced to disconnect from many parts of our lands, and that was sad, and that was hard. I talked about some of the racism that we've had to endure and continue to. It's still a part of our lives. We became voiceless. Voiceless in that in Canadian schools, up until very recently, you didn't learn about us in a good way, in a full way. You learned a part of us, often that we were savages, uncivilized, unsophisticated. And so, through the schooling system, then we became voiceless. I don't know if any part of your group there are Indigenous people. I haven't met anybody. And so there are many professions where there are very, very few Indigenous voices still today. And that needs to change. That needs to change. And we're working on it. We've been working on it. But it's tough. For example, today, we cannot develop a teacher education program for Indigenous language teachers. Why? Because They don't exist in post-secondary. There's no place right now in post-secondary. There's no way for them to certify Indigenous language teachers unless they learn it in English or French. There's no way to accredit Indigenous language teachers because the accreditation bodies don't recognize our languages still today. And so I want you to know that there are many, many challenges collectively that we face. And for your next chapter, you can participate in changing that. Looking to see where Indigenous people can finally have a voice, tell their stories, share their teachings. You know, our land needs it. Earth needs it. The sky needs it. I was invited by the Pope to come to the Vatican last year, the former Pope, because he believed that what we've done to the earth, the only way that we're going to be able to do something, to learn to do something, is to learn it from the Indigenous people. And so he invited 50 Indigenous people from around the world to come to the Vatican to talk and to share. And that's happening. That's happening. We're doing this at UNESCO. Right now, we're coming into the 5th year of the decade of Indigenous languages. So people from around the world are trying now to change things, and you're part of the change. And I want to thank you so much for sitting here and listening to me. I only got through probably a third of my slides, but they can be available to you if you like them, if you want them, and that hopefully in the future we can continue the story. So thank you very, very much. I'm going to be here. If any of you have questions or want to talk, I'm available. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lorna. You taught us so many words in the brief span of time that we got to spend with you, but Colette way to listen. It was an honor to listen to you, and I thank you for offering your time so generously and offering to stay. So appreciate that as well. And I think you have a room full of people that if you said, "Who are you?" the first thing would say, "I'm a planner." And it might be interesting today if we said instead, "I am a whole human being." And really thought about what that meant, because I was sitting here reflecting on, well, that's a really different way to think about this object here. So thank you so much. So I'll just wrap up with a few brief announcements. First, I am obligated to congratulate the FAR side team, the winners of last night's trivia. I'll ask you to stand, FAR side, if you wouldn't mind. Yeah, so very happy for you. Really delighted to be able to announce that. It was very important to me. I just want to let you know that Team Ride the Whale has been training. We were working when some of you were wasting time walking and running. We were on GeoGuessr, looking at the difference between West Kelowna and Kelowna, and we have just ordered matching tracksuits, and we're ready to come back next year. So Be warned. Okay. A super thank you to the organizers of the trivia. It was a riot last night. It was a lot of fun for it. If you're on a field trip, move swiftly down to the next floor to get on your way for the field trip. Same thing this afternoon if you're heading out on a field trip. If there's something you're going, I'm going to miss this session, many of the sessions are being streamed and will be available to you after the conference, so not all is lost. On that, you're going to see, my other one, you'll see people with tags on that say, let's chat. Have you noticed them? Have you spoken to them? No. They really, really are very needy and want to talk to you. They desperately, it's your PIBC council, they desperately want to know what you would like to see as the direction for council, anything you have to say. You can ask them anything. There's nothing that's off the table. Nothing is too personal. That's what I've been told, so feel free. If you just want to tell them personal things, they would love to hear your deepest secrets, things you'd like to share, whatever. Take as much time as you want, really. Hours at it. They're looking for you. And if you do speak to one of the Let's Chat people, you can enter into a draw to win a free registration at next year's conference. And so it's worth it. Go share your feelings. Those deep, dark, those ones you've been holding in for a long time. Here's your chance. Tell them what it's all about. And then if you are signed up for tonight's Gala Awards dinner and you have a ticket but you don't think you're going to be able to make it, feel free to take your ticket to the registration table. There's people here who would really like to go, and that would help them out. So I hope you're having fun. I hope you're meeting new people and expanding your networks and learning something. I hope you take action today on building your next chapter, and I can't wait to hear about all about it. So on your way, field trip people, off to get coffee, or come and speak to Dr. Lorna.